Vanuatu's Citizenship by Investment program is suffering. It started last year when their economic citizens lost visa-free travel to Europe's Schengen area. Then it applied to all citizens. This year they lost visa-free travel to the UK. Today I'm going to tell you my advice for Vanuatu and what you can learn for that if you're looking for citizenship by investment. First, let's talk about what citizenship by investment is, because in many cases it's actually not an investment, but it is a way to get dual citizenship in a streamlined way, really no matter who you are, as long as you've got a clean background check. Citizenship by investment allows people to either make a donation to a country that needs the capital to build roads and schools, and so in exchange for donation they grant citizenship to either you or your entire family. Or some countries like Vanuatu have other options whereby you can invest in things like bonds. Other countries have real estate options, which we generally don't recommend, except in countries like Turkey or occasionally St. Kitts and Nevis. But the bottom line is you're putting money into the country either as a donation, which is possible in Vanuatu, or as an investment where they have newer options available. And they're giving you citizenship without having to live there, without even having to go there, in a matter of months. And so if you don't qualify for citizenship through your family tree, if you don't want to move overseas, if you don't have some reason or some way to get a second passport, but you want that protection, you can do it. Most of these CBI programs, as they're called, are in the Caribbean, and they are a little bit higher level. They've always been taken a little bit more seriously than Vanuatu. With our clients, Vanuatu is something that we recommend when someone wants a third or a fourth passport, when there's a problem. Vanuatu is a bit more flexible to deal with, but really, I mean, there are countries in the Caribbean that are more flexible to deal with. And so I think the Caribbean program should stay doing what they're doing, even though they've also come in the spotlight. So far, they've pretty much maintained their visa-free travel. 4 of the 5 Caribbean programs still have visa-free access to the UK, and those countries used to be part of the British Empire. And yet, a lot of Westerners watching this think that if you have to get a visa to go to a country, that makes your country some kind of pariah. It doesn't. There's no doubt that Vanuatu doesn't have a great reputation. I don't really think anybody should be incorporating their company in Vanuatu, even though it's tax-free. I don't really think people should be, banking in Vanuatu, even though, again, it's like just everything's tax-free there. The country itself, if you want a place that's really laid back and developing, and you like that proximity in the South Pacific, I mean, that could be an interesting place to live. I think there's probably better options, whether it's for tax-friendly living or just beautiful beaches that's closer to other places. But if you want to be far away from it all, except for Australia and New Zealand, it's a good place to live, and you can get residence there. But the country overall just has this reputation for like banks that really don't pay attention that much. They're trying to shape up that act, a zero tax just on absolutely everything. If you have a Vanuatu company, like people don't want to open a bank account for it anywhere else. It's just the country does kind of have a bit of a bad reputation, but it's not because they have to apply for visas. And so how good or bad a country's visa-free travel is dependent on why you want that second passport. If you want a second passport because you're planning on getting rid of your first passport, you think there may come a time when your first passport won't work, well, having the ability to go to as many countries as possible is a good idea, although if there's some kind of catastrophe going on in the world, I doubt the first place you'd want to go to is London, where if you're a Vanuatu citizen, you now need a visa to go to. And so applying for visas is indeed less than ideal. If there's only a few countries you want to go to, I mean, applying for a visa to like Thailand or Indonesia or Mexico or something isn't really that difficult. It's like the US and the UK, Australia. Those are the more difficult ones, although Vanuatu's can fly through Australia and New Zealand, not go in, but just fly through as a condition, because it's kind of how they get to their country. And so while we often tell clients like, hey, don't look at Vanuatu unless you really, really have to for a passport, if you're a more intrepid type, there could be some value. I want to say this with the condition that I am the goody two-shoes of the offshore business. We really only want to work with people who are above board, who file their taxes, and if they don't file their taxes, it's because they've left the tax system legally. People who keep their noses clean. But there's a difference between someone who just wants to have far-flung options and someone who's done something wrong. There's plenty of people who are in that former category, and that's kind of where my advice to Vanuatu starts. First thing they should do, they should apply a sort of Trumpian Vanuatu first. and they should say, listen, we are going to talk to people about the value of Vanuatu, the fact that we have, if you're a citizen, you have the ability to come and live here. We don't apply pretty much any kind of tax. It is kind of distant from the rest of the world. It is a rather neutral country in that it has good relations with China. It has, on the visa front, not so good relations with the West, but you know, everyone from the U.S. and other Western powers have been there trying to get Vanuatu on board for certain things. To maintain this kind of neutrality that, certain countries, let's say in Latin America, now in Africa, and certain places in the Balkans, like Serbia, for example, have done. Vanuatu citizens can still, not that this is on the top of many people's lists, but they can still travel visa-free to Russia. There's like that connection. A lot of countries have kind of lost the ability to do that. And so just kind of being in that league where it's part Western facing China, Russia, like Vanuatu has a certain neutrality. And so if the European Union doesn't want Vanuatu, certainly you should correct any issues where certain people are getting in that shouldn't get in, because anyone else who's a Vanuatu citizen doesn't want their passport associated with, some money launderer or something. So obviously, due diligence should be done for the sake of the country, not having the wrong people come in. And yet, there's money launderers who are U.S. citizens, and in many cases, like, they still get to travel. They go to jail or they get sentenced, whatever happens, they get out and they get a U.S. passport, and like, no one's thinking they shouldn't have a passport. Heck, maybe some of these Western countries should encourage like those people just to get out and go somewhere else. But if I'm Vanuatu, if I'm any country, I don't want bad people coming in. But I'm not going to necessarily bow down to the EU. And so if the stuff where just, hey, let's run a clean operation, let's be organized, let's not bring in criminals, if that doesn't satisfy the EU, if that doesn't satisfy the UK, then it's Vanuatu first. Because the government of Vanuatu spends barely over $500 million a year to run the country. And in the last year or so, it's seen revenues from its citizenship by investment program start to drop dramatically, in part because of all this kind of news. And I'm sure a bunch of agents are saying, oh, you don't want to get this Vanuatu passport anymore. It doesn't have visa-free travel to Europe. Well, the Caribbean passports are no longer going to be able to market they have visa-free travel to Europe under a deal that they're brokering with the European Union. And so at a certain point, you have to say, you know what? We'd like to be friends with everybody. But if the EU is just not going to accept that we have a $500 million a year economy, and that this CBI became close to half of our revenue at one point, this is how we fund our country. We're a small independent country. We have a very small population. We don't maybe have as many resources, and we don't have some of the luxuries that those larger countries have. And so we're going to do our best. But if you don't want us, that's fine. What I've been telling you for years is culture matters. And it's hard for a lot of Westerners to believe that there's not this culture of uber enforcement by the government everywhere in the world. And yet I've been to Vanuatu. You pretty much just get left alone there. There's just kind of a sleepy place, and they're not running around trying to find people and bother people. And that's probably hard to understand, but you know what? That's a fine way to run a country if that's how they want to run it. I don't think you can go there and just get away with anything, but if you're just living your life in a peaceful way, you're going to have fewer issues than someone might have in the growing police states of some of the Western countries. And so if having that more live and let live approach bothers countries that are moving the wrong direction in the Freedom Index, then I would lean in on being neutral. I'd lean in on being a freedom country. I'd lean in on my geographic location, because, a lot of people are looking for a place to go when the fur starts flying. And we've talked about places from Uruguay to Mauritius. Vanuatu may not be in the top of my list, but guess what? If they offered me a path to citizenship by making a donation or now just investing in bonds, and I can get that money back in 2, 3, 5 years, and I didn't have to go and live in Uruguay or Mauritius and buy a property to get citizenship, I could just, have that option in my back pocket now. I think that's interesting to some people, and they're not going to be worried about everywhere that they can travel, because they're looking at, hey, let me put $100,000 into a bond program, and I hope I get my money back in 3 years, and I'll keep the citizenship. I'll put some bucks into fees into the local economy for the various agents and what have you, but lean in on neutrality. The Caribbean countries, one thing people talk about is, oh, they're too close to the US. And I don't think that they've absolutely gone along with everything that the US wants them to do. They are being more restrictive now. There's a move to, doing interviews, for example, in the Caribbean countries. The price of St. Kitts and Nevis has already gone up. Some countries have said they're not going to raise the price. Others are talking about it. So whatever that you're going to do, it's never a good idea to wait when it comes to second citizenship. The terms always get more difficult, the prices always get up. But the era of invading countries has slowed down. I mean, it used to be like, the United States would be invading here and invading there. I mean, talk about citizenship by investment. Grenada. Populism is more the new world order. People don't want wars. Obviously, you've got Ukraine, you've got Taiwan on people's radar screen. Like, I don't know that like Vanuatu is really going to be in the crosshairs of a lot. And so if I'm Vanuatu, I have a passport that can, people can travel around Asia, which is kind of sort of in my backyard. They can travel to Central America, parts of, South America and the Caribbean, a few places in Europe. Ireland is still visa-free, which is an interesting country. And I would say, listen, we have access to all the non-judgmental countries, and we're the passport for people who want to protect themselves and their families, not through being able to travel everywhere in the world, but through having this certain neutrality, having a certain location, and giving you a place that you can come to if times get tough. And if you want to go to other non-judgmental countries, then you'll be able to do that with our passport. And by the way, you can always go and apply for the visas of the countries that you can. I mean, nothing against. I mean, there's a French embassy in Port Vila. You can go and apply for a visa there. You can use that passport elsewhere. Yeah, I mean, I think certain countries may be judgmental in terms of you getting a visa. If you were to go to certain European countries, and yet I think plenty of countries, and even in Europe, like Norway or something, it's like, all right, do you meet the criteria or do you not? On top of that, this is a passport you can get residence permits on. And so are most countries in the world which are non-judgmental going to say, we don't like this passport? I can tell you from personal experience, I'm not a Vanuatu citizen, but I can tell you, it's like, okay, this is your passport. We're going to run you through the system. I got a residence permit not too long ago. I sat right in front of the police officer. He's running my name through the system. Okay, you're good. Right? They run you through all the different systems. That's really more important to a lot of the countries out there than what the passport is. And so Vanuatu, my advice is, stick together with the other non-judgmental countries, pitch that, look at a country like Serbia that got together with a lot of other smaller countries and built up their visa-free travel. And if you do that and you do stuff, let's say through the United Nations and the sidelines of the General Assembly, and you do deals where you get visa-free travel to Peru or something, and you start adding some of those countries and you beef up that visa-free travel score so where the passport's a reliable second, third, fourth passport in someone's portfolio. It offers the benefits of having that access to your country when times get tough. And if you can increase the visa-free travel, that's the pitch. I'm not saying it's my first choice. I am saying reputation matters. I don't want to be associated with something where there are problems. And so I think absolutely Vanuatu needs to get organized. It just seems like a much more informal process, how they process people to become citizens through the CBI program, more so than the Caribbean. Get a formal process where bad people aren't getting in. But beyond that, if your reputation still is we don't like those people, which maybe the EU warms to them if they fix that process. But I think, going forward, judgmental countries, nothing wrong with you getting a residence permit or a citizenship there. But, they're going to look at these smaller countries and say, why are you being competitive with us? How dare you? We're going to try and put you out of business. Wouldn't you want to have one foot on the side of the person that they're trying to put out of business? Like, why are they trying to put them out of business? Why don't these bigger countries want competition? That, to me, is the pitch for Vanuatu. Reputation is very important to me. But that aside, I think there's some place in your passport portfolio for countries that just aren't that great for travel, but you could use them as an actual place to go. Now, if you're thinking, oh, that Vanuatu sounds interesting, I still want to caution you. There's questions that should be asked. For example, if you go to, let's say, a bank account in Switzerland or some country, and they ask you to list all your citizenships, and Vanuatu goes on there, it might raise an alarm bell. And so you always want to consider various factors. That's one thing we do at Nomad Capitalist. We help clients look at all the different options. That's why most companies help people get citizenship in 1, 2, maybe 5 or 6 different jurisdictions. We've done it in close to 3 dozen. We've helped people move to dozens of tax-friendly countries around the world, open bank accounts in close to 4 dozen. We have experience with making this stuff all work together. And it's more than just getting a passport. You want to know the holistic approach. We've had people recently who've been talking to me and saying, I wish I would have just paid you the first time I called, because learning this stuff the hard way was a lot more expensive than getting a plan made from experience. So go to nomadcapitalist.com if you're looking for a second passport. If you're looking for a global backup plan from your country, we can help you do that. But you want to consider all the unknown unknowns, and it goes beyond just getting a passport, and it involves asking a lot of the right questions. That's what we do.